Of Second Amendment Sis. I'm Steffanie Rivers, and my co-host Phyllis Petit is not here with us today, but she is on special assignment. We want to welcome you though to the show. We are multicasting on several platforms. You might be watching us on Facebook, our Second Amendment Sis Facebook page, or you might be watching on my YouTube page. We welcome you on whatever platform you're watching, and pretty soon we'll invite you to join the conversation. But if you're new to the conversation, we want to welcome you to be a subscriber so that when we post new videos, you will be the first to know. Now, we are here because we're talking about the conviction of former killer cop from Fort Worth. His name is Aaron Dean, and Dean was convicted of manslaughter in the death of Atatiana Jefferson in Fort Worth in October of 2019 is when it happened. And in case you don't know the story, I'll just give you a little bit of background. A neighbor had called in the middle of the night to the cops to say that the front door was ajar at Atatiana Jefferson's family home that was across the street. And then when the cops showed up, instead of going to the front door, knocking on the door or announcing themselves at least as police officers, this Aaron Dean cop at the time decided he was going to go in the dark through the backyard and where Miss Jefferson and her nephew were inside of their home minding their own business. And when she thought she heard someone in the backyard, she armed herself with her legal firearm. And then that's when Killer Cop Dean shot Jefferson through the window while she stood inside her home. And it happened all in front of her nephew, who also testified at the trial. The cops testified that they never announced themselves, so they admitted that. And that's probably why an all-white jury convicted Dean. They convicted him of manslaughter instead of murder. And some people say it should have been murder instead of manslaughter. The sentencing is going on next week. We're going to talk about that. But it is the first time that a law enforcement officer has been convicted of killing someone unjustifiably in Fort Worth ever. And so longtime residents are surprised at that. We've got one of those long-term residents with us today. His name is Ro Brumsfield, and he is the founder of Our Tribe. And we also have with us retired FBI agent Dwayne Gibson. He's also here to talk with us about this. Thanks for joining, guys. How are you?
Awesome.
Good evening.
Good. I can hear everyone. So let's start with you, Ro, as a longtime resident, lifelong resident of Fort Worth. You said previously that you were surprised that he was convicted, that the cop was convicted. Why are you so surprised at that, given the evidence?
Yeah, given evidence, honestly, when it comes down to it, you come down to people. You come down to people's heart. You come down to people's minds. You come down to people's background. We're in Tarrant County. We have Sharon Wilson, district attorney. If you've been in the justice system or if you've ever been arrested in Fort Worth, pretty sure you know who Sharon Wilson is. She doesn't have our community best interest in heart. So it wasn't her that tried. It was Dale, someone who surprisingly did a pretty good job. So we have a Republican district attorney's office. You have a police officer, which is no matter what they do, they get a different light than everyone else. So you have a police officer on trial, a Republican district attorney, and an almost all-white jury with nobody black on the jury. So 1 + 1 didn't equal to 3 on this one to me. So I'm actually really surprised that we got a conviction on anything, even a lesser charge. Am I satisfied with it? Am I happy with it? No. However, we have a bad cop in jail tonight.
And so, Dwayne, let's get you in on this. what did you, where you followed it, what did you think, despite with the evidence of the person, because there were two cops that showed up. I guess one went one way around the house, the other went the other way around the house, but it turns out that neither of them thought it was that they needed to announce themselves in the middle of the night walking around somebody's backyard. Were you surprised that Aaron Dean was convicted?
It's always a crapshoot when you go to trial, and the odds are always stacked in local law enforcement's favor. As Rose said, you've got a Republican set up from top to bottom in Fort Worth's judicial system. Our community over policed, my opinion. You never separate from your partner. As you just stated, Steffanie, one went left, one went right, didn't announce who they were. It was supposed to be a welfare check, not a hostile environment. I understand that her front door was open. If I'm not mistaken, that part of Fort Worth may be slightly on the older side. Everybody doesn't have AC, so you open your doors old school. You get the cross air going through your house. I think the tactics were bad. I admit that's Monday morning quarterback, and I wasn't there, but I've always been taught if you go with a partner, you and your partner stay within eyes distance, hands reach, no farther away, because it takes two to make one. Two is one is none. The fact that we have a former cop in the jail is a plus. Is it a big plus? It's a start.
So a lot of people are making, they're saying that, the jury had choice to go with murder or manslaughter. And Dwayne, do you know that, can you talk to us about the difference? Why they might have chosen manslaughter? Is it because it's lesser than murder and they know they had to do something? Um,
Well, if you look at murder's a state of mind. I have intent. Okay, sorry, Ro. Hate to use you. Let's just say Ro, I don't know, maliciously hits my former ex-wife, one of my children, something of that nature. I hunt Ro down and I just beat him to death. That's my state of mind, is to commit murder. I've thought about it. I planned it out. I walked up on him. In law enforcement, they give them that qualified immunity. I have problems with that. That's a whole different storyline. Um, uh, Proven murder is hard, especially against a cop, because most cops don't sit there plan it out 2, 3 days in advance. That's something the average citizen does when they feel they've been wrong. They hunt somebody down, they corner them, they kill them. I'd like to think they sat down, they talked about it. Somebody gave them the law book on the status for what murder is, and they landed on manslaughter. If we go back a couple of years ago in Dallas, a certain female cop whose name I won't mention got 10 years. She tried a whole different venue to get off. It didn't work. I think across cultural issues going on that people are actually starting to realize we got to start holding these guys accountable. And I was thinking about this a while ago before I clocked in. Before I retired almost 20 years ago, the FBI sent out a massive notice to all law enforcement across the country. White supremacists are trying their best to get into law enforcement. They told everybody, every police department turned a blind eye. And also at that time, they were talking about Mexican males and black males going to the military to get the same training that you get as a law enforcement official. Which one do you think they jumped on and actually investigated? They didn't investigate the people going to the police department, as we're seeing today. If you look across the board, I used to have this conversation with my coworkers all the time. Most of our metropolitan police, I'll use Dallas and Fort Worth, they don't live within the city confines. I know if you go back on the East Coast, there are certain provinces that said if you don't live in the city province or within 5 miles, you can't work for the PD. The reason why, you have no vested interest. If you look at probably most of the guys that live in Fort Worth, they live way up in Spring, way over in Weatherford. I know a lot of guys that work DPD live up in McKinney. What correlation in their lifestyle relates to where they want to work at? Basically zero.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I was driving to Plano this morning on the Parkway, and there was a cop. There was a Dallas Police Department vehicle that was driving on the parkway. You know how when you're in traffic with a police officer, you can't tend to let that person lead the speed of the pack. And I was saying to myself, everybody's slowing down, and I'm like, why y'all slowing down? This dude, we're in like McKinney, we're almost in Plano. He does not have jurisdiction here. And then I thought that same thing. I was like, yeah, he works in Dallas, but lives all the way over here, and he's driving his vehicle home. And so, yeah, that community policing, and that's why I think it's so important. Community policing, whereby you live in the jurisdiction where you work as a law enforcement officer, it makes you think more about being more civil to people, because it could be your neighbor, your child's mother, your child's friend's mother or father. And so, yeah, that's very important. And you mentioned something else that I wanted to hit on, but until that comes back to me, Ro, during the trial, you attended the trial through Occupy Fort Worth. Was that the name of the movement that you
It was
were using to go to to get people to come out and pay attention to the trial?
it was Occupy Forte, I believe, and the rally was set for like 2:30, but they gave the verdict before then, so a lot of people didn't get a chance to make it out. The verdict was given at that point. Then we started working towards the punishment phase, which we're still in the punishment phase right now.
So what was so that was you had a group of people to go to the courthouse to be there for the trial. Is that what Occupy Forte was about?
Now, I wasn't the organizer. I was asked to go out, so I was trying to get as many people as I could to get to go out there, but I wasn't one of the organizers.
So do you plan to be there for the sentencing next week?
Monday, yes.
And so let's go to well, before we go there, I know what I was going to say, that during the defense, Aaron Dean's defense, and I want to just show a quick picture of Aaron Dean during his defense of his actions. One of the things, and that's why I thought it was important for us to talk about this on the show, was they, in my opinion, they tried to put it on Atatiana Jefferson that, oh, she got her weapon and that's why he shot her, but she was in her home and he was in the backyard in the dark, but it was her fault that she was, had a weapon in her own home, had a legal right to have it. And then even during the news reports, they made it a point to point out the weapon. Oh, she had a gun. Oh, something must have been going on. Dubious, is that the word? In her home. And I'm like, that is her Second Amendment right to have a weapon and arm herself in her home. I just feel like if that would have been somebody else in a different neighborhood, he might not have been so quick to shoot her inside of her home. What do you guys think about that?
First of all, he didn't even see the gun. If I don't know if you got a chance to see the video of him actually shooting her. It was a half a second from the time he said, "Let me see your hands," to the time he pulled the trigger. At no time from the time he shot her to the time they entered the home did he mention the word gun. He never mentioned the word gun. And if anybody ever seen any police show, or you seen cops or whatever, if they ever see a gun, that's the first thing they holler, and they holler to the top of their lungs, "Gun, gun, gun, gun." So from the time he shot her to the time they entered the home, and it was my understanding that his partner entered the home first. If he would have saw a gun, as he said during the trial, "I was looking down the barrel of a gun." If he was looking down the barrel of a gun, he would have informed his partner of that before she entered the home. He didn't see a gun until they rolled her over, and then he said something to the effect of, "Oh, we have a weapon here." So that's the first time he mentioned gun. So from the time he murdered her to the time they entered the home to the time they actually rolled her over, that's the first time he saw a gun. On top of that, there was no glass fragments in her hand. As if he was looking down the barrel of a gun, Then if he'd have shot through the window, there'd have been glass fragments in the hand. The defense before the trial said that they were going to prove that there was a laser. He saw a laser on his chest. That's why he shot. That never was proven. So basically, you had a coward on duty, went gung ho, saw a black silhouette and shot. And then when he sighed, because they saw it was a big sigh after he saw the weapon. He saw the gun. I guess we have a gun or something like that. And then he sighed. It was a sigh of relief. So now he has something to pin it on. Now he said he saw a weapon, but at no time, not in the body cam video, from his words, from his actions, at no time he saw a gun. So, and I'm glad the defense finally made that a point during closing. That should have been one of the main points they hammered on through forensics and everything through the trial. But at least they got it. And I think that was an impressionable part on the jury that gave him a guilty verdict of manslaughter.
So, Dwayne, what did you pick up on that when you read or when you saw how they tried to pin Miss Jefferson's murder on her, like it was all her fault, that if she hadn't, and right, it's kind of like they built the narrative after the shooting instead of going with the truth, basically.
If you look back at most shootings over, let's say, the last 10 years, whoever the victim is, they always crucify them. Especially now in the day of social media. I teach my children, I've told them since they were teenagers, watch what you put on social media. If anything goes sideways, the first thing they're going to do is use whatever you do, whether it's innocent or whatever, they're going to use it against you. You can pick anyone you want. Every time somebody gets shot that has melanin, the first thing they do is they want to find some bad pictures. They never use their cute little high school graduation pictures. They want to find some pictures of them in a hoodie or whatever way you want to look at it. Whereas if you look at, what's his name? The Dylan Roof, I believe his name was, and all those other ones. Every time they did those mass shootings, they never used their social media pictures. They went back and found them as a little choir boy in church. It's crucifixion through the media now. It's not about let the words prove, let the evidence lead you to the truth. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, today they brought up this individual's failure to pass a psychological review. That should have been a clear hint to anybody in Fort Worth PD. Do not hire this man. He's a ticking time bomb that's eventually going to go sideways. Like I said, it goes back to what I said a few minutes ago. The FBI told everybody almost 20 years ago, start looking at your recruits. That's why they have psychological evaluations. See if they lean towards that far right concept. We want to go back to 1822, 1612, or whatever. That doesn't fit into policing. I don't care whether it's black, brown, blue, green, or yellow. It's supposed to be you do your job fairly across the board. But as this individual is showing, Fort Worth probably has a whole bunch more of them. I'm not going to pick on that officer that was standing in front of me. He's coming down the walkway. Looked a little juiced to me. Probably a former football player that peaked in high school, maybe college. Where'd a lot of them end up? Law enforcement, local PD. They couldn't get out of the city. You know, that leads to a whole nother conversation to have with my associates about where they peak at 18. Who do they get peaked out by? People that look like me, you, and Ro. And when they do, I'll go into law enforcement. I'll get even when I'm 35, 40 years old. I don't have to show them any deference to civility. I can get away with it because the system will protect me to the best of its ability as long as I don't go too far. As this individual, I'm not saying his name, went too far. It was supposed to be a safety check. That means knock on the front door, announce yourself out the box. Don't go looking for trouble. Even if you see the indication, yes, I'll say a door open at 2 o'clock in the morning is a hint. But then again, you're there for a safety wellness check. Do that first because they all roll in together. If it goes from, per se, the what you can see, doctor, if he looked in the door and saw blood, that's a whole different format. But he didn't check the door. He saw the door open. He and his partner split again. As I said, bad tactics. And what we get is a young lady dead needlessly over 3 years ago. And now we got this silly fight we have going on in the judicial system here in Tarrant County that shouldn't be there in the first place.
And, you know, I'm at the point now where I just hesitate. I don't think I've ever had a moment where I would say, "Oh, call the police," and I would say, "No, don't call the police." But I think if I was in that position, because you just never know what type of cop, because we know there are good law enforcement officers, just like there are bad law enforcement officers. You don't know who's going to show up. So I don't even know that I would, if I felt like something is going on at my neighbor's house and I care enough to call the police, and that means I care enough that I mean, I know you, and I might walk over there myself or say, "Hey, is everything okay? I see your door open," before I would call the police, in my opinion, because you just never know. I mean, I don't know. They never really talked about who the neighbor was, but I know that person's got to be feeling very terrible because maybe, their intentions were good, and to learn this is the result of your good intentions. But we just have to second guess even calling 911 these days. So her nephew testified. How would you guys, do you think that was a part of the swaying the jury for a conviction as well, because a child was involved and was traumatized by all this?
I didn't like the way 3 years ago where they put him on a Blue Lives Matter shirt, and they interviewed him without a parent, or without his parent, without a guardian with them. And so they took that testimony. This is a defense. They took that testimony and tried to match it to his current testimony and said that he was coached. Well, he was coached back then. The lady asked him a question, and of course he agreed with what she just said. Well, you're 9 years old, and you just saw your auntie, the one that's helped raising you, tragically die. You don't know what's going through that child's mind, and he should have had somebody with him. So, but I do think it was compelling at the end. I think it helped now during this trial. And again, I just didn't like the way they put him in a Blue Lives Matter shirt, and then had a police officer really, in my opinion, interrogating him right after his auntie died, and then use that footage to try to help the defense this time. I mean, I just didn't like that the tricks with the kids or whatever. And I think in retrospect, we should have something in place that if it's a police involved shooting, you should have a third party counselor or somebody. You shouldn't have the police there during a police shooting. It should be another buffer in between there, just checks and balances. But I do think he helped because he did stand up strong. He helped some young man, went in court and did the best he could under the circumstances.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I'm surprised that they would be able to get away with that. Don't you? Isn't that maybe they, there's always these extenuating circumstances where they claim they don't have to follow standard operating procedure, but it just seems a child, why would you interview a child without a parent or guardian being there? That's just seems like logic. Um, yeah, logical.
I agree with you. I think there should have been a crisis manager somewhere in the process to go, okay, it's like when a cop gets in the shooting, they don't get interviewed immediately unless it's a hot system, like it's something at a bank robbery or something. They give them 48 hours. That's 48 hours to sit down, let your mind come back from a traumatic experience. Then they have a conversation with you. It gets back to what I said before. You said it, Steffanie, over policing. Okay, we can push the rules around a little to the left, a little to the right. If we do it just enough, we might get the outcome we want versus, like I said, let the evidence take you where it takes you. Stop trying to direct it. Stop trying to manipulate it. And it just, if it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. Because if you try and cover up bad, it's going to show up. And, you pick George Floyd, Rodney King, take any of the recent bad ones, instead of just going down the pathway, it's sitting right there in front of. Now we're going to try and massage this one. As soon as you start massaging stuff, it starts coming out the side, it comes out the back, comes right back out the front door.
So when we're going to take a quick 30-second commercial break, and we're going to come back and talk about what the sentencing and the psychologist, you hit it on it earlier, that did the pre-hiring evaluation, and what that could have meant had somebody paid attention to that. We'll be right back after this. Hi, and welcome back to a special edition of Second Amendment Sis. We're talking about Atatiana Jefferson's killer being convicted in Fort Worth this week, and the sentencing is next week. We have with us Ro Brumfield of Our Tribe and Dwayne Gibson, retired FBI agent. Before we get into that, Ro, tell us what is what's Our Tribe? What is the mission of Our Tribe?
Our tribe basically is a culture. It's not a business. And what we're doing is trying to create a platform where we can have a single point of contact that we can help one another from. We offer training throughout the year on various topics, shooting, bug out bags, judo. We go and have a good time a lot. Tomorrow we're having our end of the year party. So basically, our tribe is a culture. We're taking the best of what we have and putting it all together in one pot to try to get further together.
All right, and trying to go back to the three of us. So going back to the trial and the conviction, one of the things that the prosecution has done is they've gone and going back to the psychologist that did the evaluation for pre-hiring of law enforcement officers at Fort Worth Police Department. And one of the psychologists, or maybe the main psychologist, said that his recommendation was that Atatiana Jefferson's killer, he had an inflated sense of himself and his abilities, and he seemed to be domineering, controlling. That was his personality. And so he recommended that this person not be hired. But in all of that, I guess there's an appeals process. So this person was able to go and appeal his that ruling, and then he subsequently was hired. So maybe Dwayne, you can talk to us about what's your knowledge of that process? When, like, for people not in law enforcement, there's this personality personality quiz called Briggs-Meyer or something, where they try to determine, maybe, are you the best person for this job? And if you don't meet their standards in that personality test, you don't get hired. We don't get to go back in the and say, hey, you redo that. But law enforcement can do that.
I can speak from my experiences. I was psychologically evaluated throughout my military career because I had one of those nice job skills that played with things that terminated the world, which in turn rolled right over to being an FBI agent. I got polygraphed. My background was checked. I can't tell you how many times during my polygraph I had some interesting questions trying to, let's just say, question my life, where I stood, what I accomplished, to see if I actually lived up to what was on paper and what I had done. I'll speak of my last polygraph when I was working in weapons of mass destruction at FBI HQ. It was my 5-year anniversary. So I go in, I get polygraphed. We're sitting down, I go through all the questions. The polygrapher, I don't know if she didn't like me or she didn't like my answers, didn't like my style. It became a combative interview at the end. She was accusing me of not being forthright, holding something back, having violated some rules within the secrecy clause of my job. Now, weapons of mass destruction. You can look up. It's the Weapons of Mass Destruction Directorate. It's nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, all those things. That was one of my last jobs when I was working at FBI HQ. So I'm access to a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm just looking at her, and she's making these accusations, and I get tired because I'm a supervisor at the time. I said, look, write up whatever you want to write up. I'm going back to work. I got up out of the chair, went and told my section chief, which would be the equivalent of the guy who runs the Dallas office. I said, look, just got on my polygraph. I'm getting all kinds of static out of this woman. I'm telling you now before it comes down the pipe. She said she's going to write it up that I was everything but cooperative. I was hiding stuff. He says, no problem. I went back to work. It went out the window. But getting back to the psychological evaluation, been through it. Now, some of those traits he has, you want, but I'm not reading the report, but based on what they've said, instead of him having that much, he had a truckload. There's a big difference. Understanding the power they give you when they hand you that little shield, that badge, that ID, and those guns, that's a whole lot of power. Everybody shouldn't have it. It's like everybody shouldn't have a gun. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not really qualified to make this statement, but if psychologists that are working for the police department tell you that man or that woman, that individual has some serious issues when it comes to this power you're about to bestow on them, you're supposed to listen to those people. And we know police unions, when they want people, they will go dig in the books. They will shop around so they get the right selection of a committee to help them out. I'm not saying that's what happened. You know, those things happen in the background. I'm a firm believer, been there, been subjected to being cross-analyzed when I did undercover work, all of that fun stuff. They made statements. Some of them I agreed with, some of them I didn't. The ones I didn't, I asked questions. Okay, what are my shortcomings? How do I fix those? I mean, they weren't really negative. They were just how I interacted with the bad guys. But yeah, if a psychologist tells you this person has some issues that are potentially going to be bad news, I say listen to the psychologist.
Ro, did you want to add anything to that? Because I thought, that could potentially open up a police department to a lawsuit, or is it that nobody's ever going to be a perfect candidate, but like Dwayne just said, you want them to have a certain amount of bravado about themselves, but not so much. So it's kind of like a balancing act that needs to be happening.
Yeah, I think he touched on a lot with that. And also, I don't know under what guides that the Fort Worth Police Department is under, but there was a lot of things that officer missed up until that point. If he'd just followed procedure, shoot, we wouldn't have this conversation right now. And so there's a huge disconnect. And then even during the trial, he said, well, that's procedure. Well, that's procedure. Well, I mean, and no one was there to dispute the fact that he was right or whatever. Anyway, a lot went wrong. And we're so far as 2022, things that happen shouldn't have happened because they've had time and time again to get this right. And so as far as the psychological aspect, if there was red flags then, it should have been stopped then. So it's not that we don't have the process in place, it's that either Fort Worth Police Department turned a blind eye, it fell through the cracks. I don't know what happened to get to have that man to have a badge and a gun and to have that frame of mind going into the community and do what he did. So there were checks and balances to prevent from happening what happened, from training to the psych eval to a lot of things. This shouldn't have happened.
And although it worked in the favor of the prosecution for him to quit so he could be prosecuted, because had he stayed on the force, he could have hid behind qualified immunity. Why do you think he quit, knowing that that was going to open him up to prosecution?
I'd speculate somebody in management pulled him aside and said, you violated A, B, C, D. We're going to move to have you removed. So you got two options. Somebody in Fort Worth. There's always been this conversation over the last few years of a national database for bad cops. Police departments are fighting that left and right because cops suddenly leave departments all the time. They make mistakes. Somebody in management pulls them aside. And what they're telling them is, look, you can either leave or if you stay here, we're going to fire you. We're going to do the paperwork, get your certification pulled. You can look back at a whole bunch of bad cops and beatings, shootings. They'll leave a department and they pop up 1 or 2 states over, 5, 6, 7 counties away because law enforcement officials in that agency don't want to do the paperwork to have their certifications pulled away. I can only speak from my perception. I knew qualified immunity was not going to help me. If the trigger was pulled and I was standing behind it, I knew the first thing that was happening was, well, let's dig deep. Let's make sure I went to firearms. I've been to all of my appropriate trainings. I had the appropriate ammunition. I had modified my weapon. I knew those things going in the door. As we've alluded to, like I said, things can be moved, things can be shuffled. I just think somebody in upper management probably pulled him aside and said, this is bad, kid. We ain't got nothing for you. You on your own. Because like you said, if he could have stayed on the job, he'd have had additional resources from the police union and all those other things in there to run interference for him. But I always look at it from the moment, when you have a bad shoot, in my opinion, I always look for, does the agency remove them from the roles, or do they put them on quote unquote desk duty? Desk duty means they're still giving them the benefit of the doubt. When they terminate them, they're like, yeah, we don't want any parts of this. But like I think you brought up, Steffanie, the civil suit is going to follow this one. Everything that happened in the criminal trial is going to be turned over to the civil attorneys, and the civil levels of prosecution are lower to prove than they are in a criminal trial. I'm waiting to see how the sentencing plays out. As Rose mentioned, the makeup of the jury does a lot to help him. I would like to think they have the appropriate intestinal fortitude to follow through with the conviction and give him the appropriate amount of time in jail.
So he could get 2 years to 20 years for manslaughter. What are we thinking? So, sometimes, like you just said, a jury would say, well, we convicted him, so we're giving the family that. But he really didn't mean it, so we're going to just give him the minimum amount. So it could go either way. But what are you guys thinking based on the evidence and the fact that they did convict him about what might happen with sentencing?
Well, I can't lie, I'm a little concerned because up until today, everyone was saying, he's going to get between 2 and 20. But today they was talking about probation. He could actually walk out of there and go home on probation. That wouldn't be good for the city. If they don't give him at least 10 years, that's not going to be good for the city. So hopefully, like you said, they have the fortitude to go ahead and push through. I think the closing on the prosecution side went well because they did bring his brother up. They did walk him through, what happened. And so it left an impact on me. So if I was a juror, if I was leaning one way when the brother came up, that really would have helped me lean another way. But if they don't give him the time that he deserved, it's not going to be good. And I'm concerned that they're pushing towards not giving him the time that he deserved.
So you think it could be as little as probation? I wasn't thinking that at all.
They argued. They argued heavily today for probation. They gave statistics on how well a probationer does, and then of course the prosecution came and said, most probationers are recidivists; they get rearrested. But they brought his sister, who's another police officer, talking about how well he would do under supervision. I mean, they went in really hard today about probation, so that kind of concerns me.
So what do you think, Dwayne?
I'd like for him to get what the last one got in Dallas, plus a day. That way he doesn't get an opportunity to do all the stuff she's done for the last 2 years, asking for a review to be let out. I know if you get 10 years or less, you can keep coming back to the board like every 18 months to commute your sentence and let you out early for probation. Give him 10 years and 2 days. That way he sits in jail, because I know it's where I'd sit. And I'm not being mean-spirited. I'm just being honest. Like I said, I keep saying, whatever the rules are, apply the rules, be fair. Because as Rose said, giving him a pass sends the wrong message to the community first and foremost. Then you're telling those individuals that are inside the organization that lean the wrong way, that are sympathetic to those that don't believe in fairness and justice for all. Oh, well, he got away with it. The worst that's going to happen to me is probation. And then what are you looking for? I mean, I lived through the Rodney King. I was a child through MLK. I don't need to see that again. I've seen enough cities destroyed in my lifetime to last me 5 or 6. I'm not interested in that. It's not worth it. Do the right thing. I know I'm being optimistic. I'm not there on the jury. I'm not one of those men or those individuals sitting in the box judging another man. But you had enough fortitude to find him guilty. You didn't, you couldn't find him guilty of murder. As I said, that mens rea is a little hard to prove for a cop. But you gave him something that's good for 10 to 20. Do the right thing. Because they have to live there too. And Fort Worth isn't getting any lighter. Tarrant County's not getting any lighter. Texas isn't getting any lighter in skin tone. It's getting darker and darker and darker, whether they like it or not.
So the closing arguments for are there closing arguments for in the sentencing? Is that how it works? So, or did that happen today and Monday the jury is going to decide what they're going to decide on the sentencing?
Both sides has rested, and so the trial essentially is over with, and so it's in the hands of the jury, and it's whatever they come back with. So as far as any more bringing up arguments or evidence and all that's over with. We're waiting for the jury to come back with a decision.
So then we'll be. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
Well, I was just gonna say, that's what we'll be waiting for. We'll try to get, as time goes on, you never really get over the death of a loved one, especially when it happens like this, when it could have been avoided. But we'll try to see if we can get someone from the family or close to the family to come and talk to us about it. Like what would they want to happen? What does justice look like for them? Because I think it's true that probation. That never would have crossed my mind, but I wasn't at the sentencing hearing today. So that's bad that they would even, of course they want the least common punishment. It's like no accountability. No, I know I was wrong and I took a life and I know I have to pay for it. So I'm willing to accept whatever you give me. It's like always trying to back away from accountability. And I just don't know where, I guess, nobody wants to go to prison, but if you do something that puts you in prison, then you did that to yourself, basically. So I will certainly keep an eye on that as we move forward. So one last thing, do you think that this trials like this or testimony about the defense and how they said, she had a weapon and therefore she pulled it out and that's why he shot her, which we've already said that was not the case. Do you think that makes people more willing to arm themselves and legally arm themselves and get trained and exercise their Second Amendment rights? Or you think this makes them not want to be anywhere near a weapon?
It could go either way. I think there are just some people who are just totally against guns, and they'll use this to back that fact up. And there are some people that might, hey, maybe I do need to start leaning toward. I think we're trending towards arming ourselves a little bit better, a little bit more. I don't know if this case will help or hurt that. I honestly don't know if this will help or hurt that, but I think we're trending positively. But I don't know if this will help that.
So I know that both of you are doing your part in our community to help train and share knowledge of self-defense techniques. Just because that's everybody's right, and everybody should be okay with that, learning self-defense techniques, whether it's with a weapon or without a weapon. But being able to maneuver, being able to be an asset and not a liability in case of an emergency. That's what I always want to be, an asset. I don't want you to be like, oh Lord, Steffanie gonna hold us back. I don't want you to say that. I want you to be like, oh, she got us, she got us. And so I want to thank you, both of you, for being being an asset and being a wealth of knowledge for me to go to and be able to ask questions. And I'm sure there are a lot of other people who feel the same way. So any last comments on this as we move forward into the new year and celebrating Christmas in about a week or so?
No, just first of all, thank you for bringing me on, especially with the distinguished panel that we had this evening. I think that I don't think this will be the last time we have a tragedy like this, and so I think as a community we really need to be more reactive, not reactive, proactive versus reactive. So if something like this, we can react a lot better, and not emotionally. We can start actually putting stuff into place so this won't happen again. And also, we need to be connected anyway, because I was on a lot of conservative websites, and I hope I don't take you too past your time. I was on a lot of conservative websites hearing about what they thought about the trial, and it was over like 3,000 people on this one forum. It was some attorneys that was hosting it, and in their mind, it didn't matter. I mean, they had our sister on marijuana, meth, all that. This is Atatiana Jefferson, and none of this came out in trial because she wasn't on meth. But saying that to say this, it didn't matter that she was a college graduate. It didn't matter that she was a caretaker, her nephew. It didn't matter that the only reason her door was open because they had burnt some hamburgers and they was in there playing video games. That was a great night they was having, eating hamburgers and playing video games, and then this happened. So, but all of that didn't matter. It was the fact that he was a cop, and it was the fact that they said they just couldn't see themselves convicting a cop. So to be to this point, I think is not. Of course, no one's happy. We want him to get the max. I mean, you took a life. You took a life for reasons that you put yourself in that position to take that life. Asking for 10 years shouldn't be. That should be minimum. That should be minimum, because 10 years later, you still have a full life to live. You can still go out, open a business, have fun. After 10 years, she can't do that. Zion, her nephew, would be traumatized for life. You've traumatized a whole family and a whole community. And like you're saying, I know no one wants to go to prison, but he's gonna have to do that time. He's gonna have to do that time, because you took too much from, and that was your fault. That was not her fault. That was your fault. Like I said, the prosecutor said you removed all choices from her. She'd had no choice in none of this. You took all that from her. And so, yeah, he definitely has to do that. And that's why I'm trying not to get upset or anything like that. I'm just really concerned that they're trying to get him to walk on this, and he really needs to do time. He really does.
Dwayne, any last comments?
Stay safe. Enjoy the holidays. And as Rose said, connectivity with the people around you, people in your neighborhood, your friends, your family. I'll bring up Twitch from the Ellen Show. I've lost friends to the same concept. Check on all your friends. It's that time of year. You never know what's going to happen. Start at home. Be safe. Be as kind as you possibly can. That's the best I got for you.
All right, guys. Well, thanks again for joining us, and we'll keep you on speed dial in case we need your expertise again. So if I don't speak to you before Christmas, Merry Christmas, and we'll see you in the new year.
Have a good evening.
All righty. Yeah, be safe.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Thank you as well for joining us. And we want you to be safe, have a happy holiday season, Merry Christmas, and stay safe. And as we've said, check on your people and make sure they are good mentally and physically. To find out more about Second Amendment Sis or our tribe, we have Facebook pages and websites. You can also send us a message if you want to know more, and we can lead you in the right direction. We'll see you next time on Second Amendment Sis, because we're coming back in 2023 with some special shows for you.